actually recording, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I'm just going to do a clap.
On the 21st of August 2021, Will Stiles received confirmation that, after 5 years of campaigning and political knockbacks, numerous failures, and thousands of hours of work, the University of Plymouth would permit the creation of a men's welfare officer. The first of its type in the country, it is intended to offer a voice to male students, promoting issues including domestic violence, mental health, suicide, and others on campus. This is his story.
I didn't set out to do it, there was no...
And famously used this as justification for denying the creation of a men's forum, a service that would now offer an official voice to male students and their issues for the first time in the UK.
There was no experience of activism. It started simply because, because of the he for she talk that Emma Watson gave at the UN.
But the good news is that we have a uniting movement. It is called He for She.
Which, encouraged men to step up and support feminism and all that. And, I was one of those guys that was like, yeah, why not? I'll step up. So I joined my university's feminist society, and that's all by the by. But as part of that, I was introduced to the Women's Forum, which was a platform for promoting women's issues and, campaigning for female students' issues on campus. And I thought, this is great. But of course, it wasn't a space that I was invited into because I was a man. And I thought, that's fine. But where's the men's one? And of course, they all gave me a very weird look and said, well, there isn't one. I said, oh, well, I'll find out how to set one up then, because clearly we need one. And that's how it started, really. I then...
Men need women.
There are no differences.
Why is there resistance?
Men are facing a crisis.
Constantly male responsibility.
That the Equality Act does not apply to men.
I will not give up on my campaign. Never give up. I didn't give up. Hard not to give up. But remember, never give up. Never give up, that's for sure.
It seemed like a tiny job right up until it was denied the first time. It seemed so straightforward. I was almost half-asking it because I was like, it's very simple, we've just forgotten it. All that needs to be done is to draw the attention to the fact that we've forgotten it. So it started on demographics with male issues as almost a footnote to prop it up and say, and by the way, we can also focus on these male issues that do exist. And the reaction was, this was back in 2016, which I'm told is a bad time to have been talking about these issues. I didn't know the broader context, but I'm told that was a very bad time to be bringing up men's issues. So I was counteracted with matters of patriarchy and institutional prejudice and how we were almost redressing the balance by not including men. So it started as an argument of democracy, but as it grew, I saw that this is much more an issue of empathy than it is a matter of systematic democracy. And that's when it became much more focused on the actual issues and about actually, it's not just about the democracy, because once this seat is at the table, what can it do? It can do a lot. And then it began to focus on, wow, we have an obligation to make sure this role can fulfill that, because there's a gap and we need to make sure that people are supported and cared for, all people. And in this case, it was men, because that was the group that just didn't have this platform. And that in itself felt like something that was so tedious, because how do I explain the core principles upon which we should build this? And that's why it just ballooned and ballooned and ballooned, because I felt that the very bedrocks that needed to exist didn't exist. So there was no foundation to start upon. I had to start laying from the bottom. And yeah, it grew.
Year 1. How hard can it be?
An invitation was shared within the Feminist Society to attend a women's forum, which was to be a place for women students to bring issues and discuss solutions and campaigns on campus. Being a society member, Mr. Stiles asked for and was granted permission to attend. Later, he asked the Feminist Society members if they knew when the men's forum was scheduled. There wasn't one to schedule, he discovered. Following up with the student union team responsible for managing this part of the students' union, the process of creating a new forum began. A motion was written and passed to the Union Executive Committee. It did not go well. The committee, made up of the sabbatical officers and the existing forum chairs, issued an invitation to withdraw, reconsider, and return with a more fully considered motion. The reformed motion was accepted for hearing, winning by a single vote. A speech outlining the key issues was then presented, formally introducing the motion. It failed.
There were a lot of real shock moments. I think that's certainly the one that sticks out. Is I wrote a letter to the Board of Trustees because I thought, they're the ones that decide ultimately. The Union Council puts forward policy, but the Board of Trustees approve it. They're like the Queen, if you like, in the democratic stricture. They're the ones that sign it. So I thought, well, they're the ones that can overturn a decision. They're the ones that actually implement it. So I write directly to them and say, this hasn't gone through in the Union Council. It was voted down. But I noticed that you're actually a limited company providing a service, forums, part-time officers. And the Equality Act outlines that you can't discriminate in your delivery of that service. So here I am representing a campaign that is openly asking for this service. So under the Equality Act and your own equal opportunities legislation, I'd like you to deliver this service for men. And of course they wrote back saying the Equality Act was written with the intent to address issues of historically oppressed groups that have faced historic difficulty, and those groups did not and do not include men. Which in layman's is they're saying the Equality Act is not applicable to men, which not only goes against the civil rights of every UK citizen, but it's also outlined as a UN human right, is the right to equality and equal access. So that's definitely the most egregious, where verbally, openly, the human rights of all male students in Plymouth was just denied as existing. I think there must have been some real doublethink going on in that room when they wrote that letter. And I would love to tell you that they were embarrassed and they apologised, even after the media scandal got hold of it and said, wow, what a crazy uni. But they kept doubling down or trying to re-justify or reframe it and say, no, you've misinterpreted what we said. I really do think does not apply, has never applied, is a very clear sentence that cannot be misinterpreted. That definitely stands out as the most egregious. There were others, but yeah, that's definitely the worst.
Year 2. Early Failures and the Equalities Act.
Year 2. Multiple discussion events and presentation evenings were held for students and Union Council members regarding the proposed forum. The required signatures to resubmit the motion were gathered. Support for a men's forum was felt to be widespread. A letter was sent to the University of Plymouth Students' Union Board of Trustees detailing how to deny the creation of a men's forum would be in opposition to the Student Union's Equal Opportunities Policy and the Equality Act 2010. It requested the trustees to mandate the creation of a forum. His local MP sent a letter on behalf of Mr. Stiles to Caroline Dinage, Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Women, Equalities and Early Years, to seek further input. Dinage did not comment on the specific case, though outlined a few exception clauses which may have allowed the Students' Union to do this, though the applicability seemed tenuous. The University of Plymouth Students' Union Board of Trustees replied, denying the reasoning behind the request, and claimed that the words within the policies Mr. Stiles had cited were meaningless. Quote, "That legislation is specifically designed to address equal opportunities for groups which have suffered historic and ongoing discrimination. These groups did not and do not include men. As a consequence, the University of Plymouth Students' Union Trustee Board does not consider that this was an act of discrimination." End of quote. The council chair decided this motion was too important for the Union Council to mandate, and so asked members to vote if it should instead go to a student-wide referendum. The motion fell. 1 for, 8 against, and 3 abstentions. The motion was then voted on. 1 for, 9 against, and 3 abstentions. Again, the motion fell.
I definitely did feel that I was asking a lot of questions that had never been asked before, and a lot of the people answering it were clearly very shocked that these questions were even being asked. It was just seen as an a priori that, a men's role doesn't exist, and the deeper questioning of why, or well, what's that based on, or does that stand up, or what about this? It's just a level of scrutiny I don't think people were prepared for, because I think these discussions just don't happen. People don't ask these questions and pursue them very far. So in a sense, yes, because it was the answer to these questions that then shocked people and then spurred more to almost join, if you like, because I suppose, they realised that the tripwire had gone and this is the road to take. I think a lot of these issues, there's a general familiarity. People have heard that male mental health as a word, there's stuff to focus on there, and that male suicide, there's stuff to focus on there. I think in the domestic violence sphere, people maybe aren't as familiar with the fact that there is a significant proportion that is male, and it's often overlooked. A lot of the issues I found the general student population were aware of in some sense, but not the details, not the issues at large, or rather not how these issues affected people in society, and certainly not how to address them. That there was a lot of ignorance in these issues. You don't have to explain or understand these ideas at any great depth. Just saying male mental health is an issue is fine. We can approach it at that 7-year-old level and just say, so we need to address it. The greater understanding isn't really needed, certainly by your audience. They just need to know, oh wow, that's an issue. How can we do something about that? Or how can my urge and care to want to help with that benefit this? It's not necessarily a bad thing, though we often say it is. You just have to approach it in an honest way, but in a simple way. People don't have time to sit and hear your big spiel, the elevator pitch. Can you pitch this to me? Getting in an elevator, getting off. And I don't think it's necessarily very hard to do this. A lot of these issues are simple. This is an issue. This could help. So let's work on that. And people do care, believe it or not, people do care about other people. So if you say, look, men in this scenario are struggling, the empathy trigger is very powerful. Focusing on the domestic violence issue, I did actually do a survey specifically for that, but I didn't use the term domestic violence because I found a lot of men from the male discussion group wouldn't recognise that within themselves, even if it was the case.
You fucking bastard!
So I asked, have you ever been struck by a partner in a non-romantic way? Because there's things that happen. And I found that 20% of all students asked had. I did ask them, do you consider that domestic violence? Very few did, but that of course is domestic violence. And that lines up with, according to the Devon and Cornwall crime statistics, what is expected. And I don't mind talking about it, but I'm one of those statistics, and I didn't hope to be during this campaign, but it became a broader story because the person with whom that incident occurred was a member of the union council at the time of not the most recent but the previous presentation, and I made the SU aware that this space is not necessarily a safe space because of this incident. And I don't necessarily blame them for this decision, but they said they couldn't do anything without a conviction, and I kind of have to agree with that. You shouldn't do things based on an accusation and a police report. But it did hurt to a degree because that presentation failed by a single vote, and of course she voted against, and of course spread some things that encouraged other people to vote against. So it could have happened a year earlier had that not been the case.
Year 3. Yes, the Equalities Act does apply.
Year 3. The Board of Trustees responded and reiterated the non-applicability once again, presenting the view that males face less discrimination that is less widespread than other groups, and thus males are not deserving of the equalities outlined in policies. The board also asserted that it was not in their hands to decide on such matters or implement such changes. An email was sent to the University of Plymouth Students' Union CEO and Students' Union President after the Union President and Chair of the Board of Trustees confirmed the 2010 Act did apply to males during a Q&A. The email sought to understand if any action would be taken and requested that the Students' Union clarify their stance and reasoning. The board believed no further explanation of their stance was needed and reasserted the point that it is not a matter within their power to rectify. The matter was closed, and they would not be corresponding on the matter further.
Yeah, it was very much the genesis. I was very much full of energy. I was, writing emails every day to anyone that would listen, the MPs, etc. And I was very, very convinced it was going to be a quick turnaround. I was saying, oh yeah, this will be done by June, because I just couldn't see reasons for it not to happen. I was very full of energy. I was very young, and I did believe that I wasn't going to give up. And though I talk about this might have been a failure, I might have had to have moved on, by leaving a framework that others could adopt, I would have seen that as a success, because that's not giving up. That's saying, I can't do this, but I've made it so that someone else can. And that was very much what my second talk was about. It was me realizing that I might not actually be able to do this, but that doesn't mean I'm giving up. I realized it's only perseverance that will get you through, because it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. It didn't matter how many emails I wrote, it mattered for how long I kept writing them. To the point even where I was given cease and desist, don't contact us ever again, we will not be communicating with you. The Board of Trustees started to send me private and confidential letters because they realised that their correspondences were being shared, because I ran a very transparent campaign. Every correspondence was on the Facebook page so that everyone knew what was going on. They didn't like that, so they started sending me private and confidential. Didn't really work, because I just sent them put up a screenshot of the private and confidential bit and said, well, they don't want me to tell you what's going on, but it's roughly this. Because I had a hunch that they weren't going to take their own membership, their own student, to court over something like that, but I didn't directly violate it.
Publish and be damned.
Yeah, sort of. It's, you guys know you shouldn't be sending this to me.
Have you got an estimate? How many emails?
I know how much it weighs when printed out, which is about 3 kilograms. I don't know how many words. I know that just my complaint, which was sort of the last big letter I wrote, fills 220 pages of A4, not double-spaced. I don't know how many words. More than I've ever written for anything, ever, including the whole of my bachelor's and master's and professional development experience record, and probably all other essays I will ever write. It's a lot. So if it was 30,000 then, easily 100,000. Easily. Because I felt I had to justify the very basics. I had to justify, you clearly are unaware that men's issues exist, so I have to justify that. I have to explain them. I have to talk about their origins, the data. I have to explain this all to you, because clearly if you knew, you wouldn't be saying the things you're saying. That was my interpretation. They clearly just have never encountered this before. But I think later on I sort of realised they are aware of this, and they just have a different frame of interpretation. They're not uninformed, it's just their worldview is different to mine.
Do you think they read everything?
I don't think they read everything. I can sort of tell based on the replies that they didn't read everything, because firstly I don't blame them. It's a lot to take in, but also there were some clear points that were just missed in their replies. They certainly haven't read the whole of the Equalities Act. I know, because page 1 says applicability, section 1, gender, male or a female. And if they'd read that, which was one of the appendices I added, so if they'd just read that, they'd know. But I do pity the person that was given the job of reading at least some of it. Yeah, I believed that the more I wrote, the less I could be ignored. The more they knew that this is serious. This isn't a whim. I'm not just, messing about here. Take me seriously.
Year 4. Fighting legal battles.
Year 4. A formal complaint was filed with the CEO regarding the Board of Trustees and argued that, quote, institutional prejudice against males within the University of Plymouth Students' Union governance system has manifested itself as a barrier to equality of access to services provided by the University of Plymouth Students' Union. End of quote. The protocol for a complaint involves a review by the Board of Trustees before being processed externally. The Board of Trustees rejected the validity of the complaint. Citizens' advice were consulted. Pro bono equalities lawyers advised that to progress in any external avenue, Mr. Stiles would first have had to have gone through the internal complaints process, a process he was barred from using.
It is easy to talk about it once you've done it, but just, for example, collecting of the signatures, that took a long time. And I'm an ASD person, so I struggle with social contact anyway, but I had to physically approach 600 people, explain who I was and what I was doing, and convince them to sign this. That was a battle, but I knew it had to be done. And it took hours and hours and hours, because if you think the time it takes to just explain it to a person, you could be there for 5 minutes. And that's one signature. And, as much as we think students do nothing, I'm a student, I've got things to be doing. So I can only really give it my lunchtime every now and then. So it was about 30 signatures a week I could get on a good week. More if there were other people doing it at the same time. I think the best week we got 100 in a week. But it's a slow process. It takes a lot of chipping away at. It's not just as simple as, I need signatures, let's get them. And that's what I mean by it's a marathon. It's just slow bits of energy consistently. This is the goal. I need to keep working at it. So a lot had changed. So when I first did it was during my bachelor's, then I did some years out, and then I did my master's. Now coming back to do it in my master's, the democratic structure had completely changed. Whereas it used to be based on demographics, it was, I think, about 7 roles. Now it was based on demographics, and they added in, I think, the 15 odd roles that were the school rep roles. So these are people who are part of the normal academic structure. So your typical students that were previously not involved. So now the council was a much more representative cross-section of student society, which was represented easily in the first time I represented it, where it only lost by a single vote, because clearly there was a lot more, well, yeah, why not? Also what changed is, I'd changed, my tactics had changed. It was no longer this great big booming, we're here campaign. It was this, hey guys, what about this? We've been thinking about this for a while, why don't give this a go? And of course the ideas had had a lot of time on campus to ferment, and the society at large had come to recognise these issues, and the people who had previously been in the positions and voted against it had all, moved on. Their legacies had, gone with them. So the ground was laid to be much more welcoming to this.
An unfortunate quirk of human nature. It's a lot easier to unite around an enemy than it is to actually decide on what to do.
Yeah. I think that I see this a lot, and certainly see it in my younger self, that when I first tried this, it seems to be a lot more about point scoring than it does about persuading. Much more about, sound biting, as though we have some kind of imaginary audience that's going to pile on and say, yes, good point, rather than diplomacy, rather than trying to agree a mutual ground. And that's very much true in how this was succeeded. So in the very end, it was very much this idea that I can't go in looking to start a fight. I'm going in looking to solve a problem. And the way I did that was I got everyone on board. So I wrote the motion, and before it went to the council, I ran it by the Officer for Women, LGBT, Trans and Non-Binary, and I got them all to tell me what they thought of it and get them to draft special clauses with me. So that way, when it came to the council, this was something we'd constructed together. This wasn't, this is what the men want, deal with it. This is for the benefit of everyone. And I know this because you've helped me make sure it is. So let's get it through. And that's why at the final vote, there were only 3 votes against. There's about 20-something voters in that space and only 3 against. So the success rate is so much higher when you see everyone as your ally than when you're going in there trying to discredit your enemy, because that just creates more enemies. So what I found is that, especially in the room of the Union Council, people aren't openly disagreeing. They're expressing concerns. And in the first instance, what I did and still do is absolutely acknowledge those concerns. I don't disregard them. They exist. They're true. One of the biggest ones was this platform could be used for misogynistic reasons. And of course, I don't deny that's a possibility. So I talked about how we can mitigate that. And I said, that concern, very valid, very important. We need to stop that. I agree. And that's largely because it's not 100% an argument of the data and the logic. It's an emotional argument. And so I found it best to connect with them on that emotional level. I agree. That could be a problem. We should be worried about that. And then I talk about how we can deal with that. I think focusing on how we disagree or what they don't know will only lead to more enemies. But by focusing on what we agree with, we are concerned, but also we care about men's issues, leads to more success. And that's the route we took in the end.
Year 5. Changing tactics and keeping going.
Year 5. Mr. Stiles secured a seat on the Union Council and modified the former motion to be more palatable. The revised version included a change of name. No longer would it be referred to as a men's forum, but a men's welfare officer. The motion was presented to a room largely in favour. Absent members of the council were given the option to vote via email, however. The motion fell by a single vote. The painstaking process of signature collection, needed to keep the process moving, began but was halted by the pandemic. The following academic year, a seat on the council was secured again, affording Mr. Stiles the opportunity to present the motion, made possible by the high number of signatures collected. After combining efforts with a newly formed group aimed at achieving the same goal, the motion was again voted on, 8 in favour, 3 against, 9 abstentions. But this did not include the email votes. After all of the votes were counted, the motion had passed.
Oddly enough, yeah. When it actually happened, I thought it would be much more emotional than it was. It was, more than anything, it was a relief, because it was quite a burden. And so when it was over, I remember feeling relieved more than anything that the task was done. People have asked, because I'm still a student for another year, if I would now run for the role. And as much as I might like to, I think others are probably better placed. And I think the energy and the commitment I could have given it many years ago, I can no longer give it. So I won't say I'm indifferent. This is a very important thing to me, and I'm very glad it's happened. But it's very much, time to move on from that onto other things and let others take it up. So I can sort of relate, yeah.
What do you think will happen to this role? Are there people out there who you think,
I think it'll come under fire a lot. I think many people will try their damnedest to discredit and to make it seem like an untenable position. But I think it will steadfast. I think it will stay and plod along just as all the other ones have. And I'm hoping, which has always been the intent, that this will become a precedent, that a student-led campaign can deliver this, because I know of so many others that have tried and failed, and some that are still going. And to know that it is possible, and to say, well, look, it happened at Plymouth, I think that's probably one of the biggest positives to come out of it. It was very much a limp across the line. The energy, if I'm honest, had faded. I'd experienced a lot of failure and a lot of personal trauma throughout the journey. It wasn't fun. I've never pretended that this was easy or fun. Collecting the last signatures was equally difficult, partly because the university, the SU, despite talking about it, had never set up a digital way to collect signatures. When the pandemic hit, they said, fine, you can do it this way. And suddenly signatures skyrocketed because it's so much easier to get them digitally. But I'd become quite good at getting signatures by that point. I knew it's better to approach a crowd because it's worth more time. It was a lot easier, but I won't lie, I had a lot less energy. There was a large group of people supporting me at that point, and they were very much nudging me, saying, go on, Will, give it one more shot. This is the last time, push it across the line. So it's very much because of them, actually. And oddly enough, the last time I did present it, another student who was part of the union council messaged me to ask me to second their motion. I said, oh, was he? He said, I'm trying to make a men's officer. I went, really? That's what I'm trying to do. And he said, no way, I didn't know you were still doing that. I said, yes. So then we combined forces, and that's when it happened. And it was very, very emotionally rewarding to see that other people independently believed in this and wanted to do this. I was like, that was an emotional success for me. So that helped push across the line. But it was a limp. The energy stores were running low. It was a marathon.
Just because people aren't necessarily waving placards and things doesn't mean they're not sympathetic.
Yeah, a lot of people deal with these issues in their own life and in their own way. But as with anything, it's about time. Do you have time to unblock your drain? Let alone do you have time to sit down and address, mental health issues or issues of social cohesion, or talk to others about it, or campaign and organise. People just don't have that time. So if you do, use it. Use it for others. But no, that's what I think we say. We think these ideas are very underrepresented and under-acknowledged, but they're not. It's just that the people that live them aren't the ones screaming about it. So you have to, if you build it, they will come. If you project it, they will hear, and they will, if you find a way to help in that instance, those people, they'll be very grateful, even though they wouldn't have necessarily screamed from the rooftops that this is something they needed. Yeah, the silent majority, as it is, we always talk about. But it's not a matter of majority and minority, it's just that these issues are part of everyone's life.
So now you've opened your mouth, you're the vocal minority.
Yeah, I'm the vocal minority. Yeah.